Good morning, good evening, good day. Greetings with a helping side of welcome to the Safe Room featuring security side quests. My name is Tristan Watty, and I am joined by the mysterious, the marvel, the present, Russ. How's it going?
Hey Tristan, how are you doing? It's a wonderful Monday. How are you
fine.
doing with the snow?
I am
Snowpocalypse.
doing just excellent. Yeah, the snow is interesting on the East Coast, and part of that interest comes from my back hurting from shoveling. But I digress. Because we have a fun one. But so I think we should warm each other up in terms of giving the proper introductions. So let's start from the beginning. My name is Tristan Watty, and I am part of the professional services division of AWS, where we help to accelerate customers' journey to the cloud in a secure manner, fashion, form, way. And I am joined by
me. I'm Russ. I come from the security incident response engineering team. We help you when you have an incident and turn that bad day to, well, not a good day, but a better day.
Yeah, one step above that, or 2 steps, or 3 steps. You know, it's the smile that does it, right?
Honestly, if it's an incident and it's not your worst day professionally, then win-win.
Yeah.
Take that.
And speaking of win-win, we're winning with producer Jeff. Thanks for joining in, as always, right? So feel free to put comments in the chat. And the way to do that is kicking us off with our usual question of, where's everybody from? Where's everybody tuning in? Where's everybody listening? Or just viewing? Feel free to put that in the comments. But we have, as always, our 2 specific questions. So our next question is an interesting one. And it is timing appropriate and a little bit of a read. So I will read it in the fastest voice as possible. So would you rather shovel your entire driveway once after a massive 3-foot blizzard, or shovel 4 inches of fresh snow every single morning for 2 weeks straight? Russ, where do you go with that?
It's got to be the 3-foot blizzard. I know it's so much harder, but I'm that one and done type of person. Yeah, I'll do that driveway once.
Yeah. And I would say that as well. But first, I say hi as well to Ari, because we bring peace of mind. And Ty, snowed in New Jersey. Nice to hear that. Right? You're part of the East Coast on my side. And Velvet, thank you for joining in. And Shadow or Sandri. So we keep going on. Glad. Well, that's one time I kill you. It only takes one time. But 3 foot, I would say just do it once. I think I'm landing on that same time, because 4 inches of fresh snow every single morning. I feel like as soon as your coffee, finishes brewing, all of a sudden it spawns.
After 5 days, you just be like, okay, I'm done with this. Every morning.
Yep. And exactly. All right. Every morning. But what you can do is, if it's just once, like this show, a week, you can always jump into having some fun conversations about security with us. So what conversation are we having today? Well, Russ, I would leave this to you. Where did we come from last week? I know you were here in spirit with us, but where did we come from, and where are we going today?
Yes, so last week's topic was mana restored, ticket closed, AWS managed services. Oh man, I missed a really good episode. What a shame. I guess I'll have to go back and watch it on our Twitch.
We got managed
YouTube.
Services to fill in.
Yeah. So, just while we're talking about it, go ahead and subscribe and like on our YouTube and Twitch and all that stuff. But this week's episode, which you do not have to have watched last week's episode for, is our new game plus. Agentic AI levels up your DevSecOps pipeline. And like everything on the show, it's a little bit of a mouthful, but it describes what we're going to talk about.
And speaking of talking about, we say hello to Victor. And we are doing great. Thank you for asking. And as always, keep the comments coming. We go off on tangents all the time, but the one tangent we won't stray from is today's episode topic, because it's AI, the revolution when it comes to DevSecOps. And why is that? I think part of it is the autonomous nature of it. So if you kind of trace back to the manual days of being able to go in and just click in the console and say, hey, I want this security feature enabled, and you click around and you type in your tags, you do all these kind of things. But there was a vision that somewhere, someday, say, hey, can I automate this? Then pipelines were born, right? Say, I'm doing a little bit of history recap in 5 seconds, but essentially it kept going on and on until it's like, hey, we have pipelines. We need to secure these pipelines. Who's in charge of that security? What is the governance? What tool are we using? So on and so forth. Then we wonder, hey, can we gamify this a little bit? And be a hard left turn, or maybe not. Because if you really think about what we do is we try to optimize, right? Think of it this way. If you're playing D&D, if you're playing a video game, you have your score sheet, your points. And
we're min-maxers.
Yeah. See, Russ is picking up what we're putting down today, because it's all a sense. What are we moving towards? What is our goal? What is our roadmap? What is our target state security strategy? I always say that 3 times during the episode. So pay attention for next time. Because as we start to think about how we optimize our pipelines, we start to think of what does the next 12 to 18 months look like? And the next 12 to 18 months of security and technology as a whole, agentic AI. And why? Because we are starting to see customers adopt this a lot more for a variety of different reasons. One, because you can have some advanced security features, especially when it comes to automating your architecture, right? I said game-inspired items. Well, think of a game-inspired security strategy where you can gamify leaderboards. And how can you optimize when you have a large-scale environment? Well, stay tuned and you kind of figure out that. But spoilers, something like Security Hub and pipelines. But it allows you to move towards that next level of your practical focus. And your focus should be, hey, what is our North Star within our organization? What are we trying to move towards? And Victor has visions of MS Defender. Feel free to put in chat, what are your visions from your security posture? While we think of some questions to ask, well, we thought of them. And here's one right away, off the bat. What's the most common misconfiguration you had to remediate? As we were talking about agentic AI, as we're talking about security automation and pipelines and things of that nature, feel free to put 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 in the chat. So, Russ, from a customer perspective, what do you think?
This is actually a really good one, because I feel like I get a pretty good mix of all of these as far as misconfigurations go. If you were to, I don't know, add in IAM related misconfigurations, that immediately, but everything else, I actually will bring that back to if I take out the server-side encryption ransomware campaign that was not too long ago. If I take that out of consideration, I would say open security groups or NACLs would probably be the number one. But just having seen that the server-side encryption with ransomware and how many people did not set up their S3 buckets to have encryption, I might have to go with unencrypted resources and public S3 buckets. But so I think it sounds like I'm kind of dancing around number 5. It's all of them.
Yeah, it's kind of
in a weirdly equal, like things that people don't do. All of them.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like since the public S3 bucket option kind of changed the default before, right? You kind of saw a dip into that, right? Just based on some of the readings and things of that nature. But I think the open security groups, I'm going with one. The reason why I'm going with one is because as we see more customers kind of migrating to AWS, it's like, okay, how do we migrate? And we have all these applications, and there may still be kind of an on-premise mindset that you have. There's like, okay, we need access to all these things, and then the firewall should catch stuff, right? So just leave it open on security groups, and then we have something in front. But if that's something in front, defense in depth, if it doesn't apply or get applied correctly, you start to see some of the potential gaps, right, that come from that. And then you don't really realize until, I would say, guard duty alerts. That's usually one of the indicators of like, hey, something's trying to access your server. Hey, something's trying to access, right? And that's when there's a lot of conversations that come after that with different individuals, right? So I think that's one of the known ones, I would say, right? The other piece, disable logging. This is also an interesting one from the perspective of, did the customer leverage something like Control Tower?
Yeah.
Because Control Tower, you have some of the defaults from disabling like the CloudTrails and the different logging sources and stuff like that. So, yeah, interesting. But I digress.
The only problem with that is if you're going to disable logging, you have to have it enabled in the first place. So
that is true. That's the other side of it, right? Where Russ, tell us about some of your stories of how you want to, help, and there's no logging.
I mean, it's a very common issue. So because logging and setting up a logging, strategy can be very complex for something that people believe have sometimes limited value. Not limited value, but very specialized circumstances where that value is worth, the regular paying of that sort of service. So you see a lot with customers that will maybe misunderstand a little bit of the shared responsibility model with AWS. I think you already touched on that with like, internal, your own accounts, security perimeter versus like AWS's, perimeter defense, which is very different. But also, there's this, I think, very common assumption that I get from customers that's like, well, can't you just go in and give me my logs? And I'm like, no, I don't have access to your logs because I'm a security engineer for AWS. And we don't look into your accounts because, that's a privacy and all sorts of other issues concern. And I think that's something that people don't realize is that there's no backup from AWS. Like if you don't have logs, you don't have visibility. So I think that's the number one thing that I hear is just like, well, can you get us this? And I wish we could. Yeah, it's set up that way very specifically.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. And side tangent, we're going a couple of these. The shared responsibility model, right? Yeah. It's important to understand those aspects as well as some of the other pieces of documentation out there, right? I always like to say, hey, read through the incident response kind of guide. And the reason why I say that is because it outlines some of the key pieces that you need to have in place just from, I would say, a technical standpoint of just like, hey, are we well architected? Well, what does well architected mean in your context, right? Especially when it comes to logs. So what are some of the logs that you should have enabled, especially if you go for Control Tower environment? We often say like, hey, do you have your VPC flow logs? Do you have your Route 53 resolver queries? Do you have your CloudTrail, right? All these things getting centralized and then getting ingested to the item of your choice, whether it goes to Security Lake and then goes to somewhere else, or do you have a third-party SIM like your CrowdStrikes or something along those lines, right? Yep. Those are interesting pieces of the puzzle. because once you start to delve into this world, you start to have an idea of like, hey, do we have the people, the processes, the technology standpoint of it? And it kind of gets a little bit, I would say, easier just from the standpoint of, okay, once we identify the people, because one of the other things that we hear is, okay, who is going to do this? And when you hear that, who's going to do that, sometimes if you don't have the people, when you get down to the technology, especially the logs, then it's like, oh, who is supposed to enable those logs? And it's the invisible person. Yeah. Right. And when you have that invisible person that enable the logs, then all of a sudden when Russ goes to help you to look for them, yeah, they're not there. So getting ahead of that. And I think that kind of segues a little bit into what we were speaking about today when we're speaking about, hey, if this is like a party we're trying to actively build, right? We like to go with the gaming analogies here, right? You want your defender, you want your attacker, you want your healer, and so on and so forth. Sometimes organizations don't have that outright built in because they don't have those people identified, right? So how do we kind of go about supplementing that? We spoke about AWS managed services last week, but one of the things that we want to get to is kind of that piece of, hey, if we were to go with agentic AI and having some autonomous AI agents taking care of some of these items, well, what do we start to achieve? Well, we start to get a little bit more zoom all the way in, proactive in nature. Yeah. That proactive piece is a very important concept, right? Because when you're responding proactively, then you start to get to the point where, hey, we're looking at the entire environment and we're trying to segment it in such a way that, hey, blogging, how do we taking care of security within the environment? Do we have an agent that's dedicated for that piece, right? And when you think of the traditional approach is reactive, right? This generates and then this happens. But what happens if you have something with a little bit more context, right? A little bit more adaptability, a little thing like that. Because the AI agents, they can analyze the security data, they can assess the risk levels, and execute remediation actions before stuff happens. And then you always can have a human in the loop within your process. But there's some items that should
right? have a human in the loop.
Yeah. So that's the key aspect of it, right? Mm-hmm. And we zoom all the way in on that, is you want to make sure that your process is laid out in such a way that is fundamental to your overall workflow. So Russ's point is, hey, have the human in the loop to do the approval before any major items or changes. You can have, if you take a step back, like a guard duty remediation action that happens. It's like, hey, root, oh, isolation. Oh, yeah, you can have those pieces. But anytime there's some major or critical items, you want to make sure there's some, let's say, goals in place in your security operations. And what are those goals? Those eventually think of a pipeline and checkpoints throughout your pipeline that says, hey, when this occurs and you're thinking of this, have a human just say, hey, I approve this, right? Because when you start to get to that point, one of the key aspects of AI agents is I would say the memory, right? If we were to put it in really simple terms, is why is it important? Because it remembers the context of your environment, what happened, and just all of that background. And when you do that, now you can start to have something that continuously improves your security response in general by learning from those past incidents, those attack patterns, those successful remediation strategies, right? Opposed to starting from scratch every time, right? And I think that's a key aspect, especially from a human perspective, right? Because, Russ, how much have you seen kind of somebody troubleshooting something and they start at different places, right? It's almost like, think of the starting line, but it's in 4 dimensions almost. And I know 4 dimensions being used wrong, but 4 directions, I should say, right? It's like, okay, and start. And everybody heads a different direction. And it's like, okay, which one is the right one? Well, it depends, right? So Do you see that a lot on your side of the fence where it's just like, okay, let's start looking into something, right? And everybody goes a different direction?
Yes, absolutely. I think that kind of goes a little bit towards more of the incident management versus incident response. So when you're kind of, maybe an incident commander or just the person who's in charge of this incident, that's something that you have to be cognizant of because, incident responders' time is very valuable. That's why we're implementing these, autonomous agents to be able to do these things to free up time for, manual responders. So if you waste that time just kind of going off and figuring things out, then, you're wasting all of that time that you've gained from these services, right? If I can use a different analogy, I kind of think of it like, a bloodhound or something that's sniffing an area to find whatever. And so, what they do is they kind of are going all around, looking for that scent. And that is what we're trying to prevent, is that initial, okay, where is the area that this is happening or whatever? You're seeing maybe logs from, I don't know, maybe a request for SNS and you don't use that service. That's more of like a like an indicator or a trail marker, but it's not going to tell you where the actual where the prize is, where that location is. So using autonomous agents to be able to connect the dots. Oh, okay, so over here is the SNS request, but it actually came all the way down here because of one of our compromised access keys.
Yeah.
You especially saw that basically at the beginning of any large campaign when people are still figuring things out and what's going on, and if this is a larger thing, that's when you see that a lot happening, because everyone's kind of confused and they're just trying to go off and chase every little detail. And then thankfully we're a very close community that brings all those details together and gets everything spun up. But that initial, oh no, where do we go? Different companies are going to look at different things. So yeah, it's very important for your organization to have a very specific context related, like a decision-making matrix type thing. So yeah, and a lot of that is, kind of, not to, skip ahead into the rest of the show, but a lot of those are the reason why we're setting these up and trying to get from, hey, I have an AI agent running to like several AI with an orchestration tool and all of those good things. But yeah, so I think that's a very common thing that I see is people just not knowing, where to start and how to break everything off, for each human, which is nice because that agent will help kind of direct you to the location. And then that way you make each individual, analyst or engineer that much more impactful.
Yeah, exactly that. And you touch upon some great points with that, where if you are starting out and you can put together an agent that says, hey, you're an incident responder and you need to look for indicators of compromise or something along those lines, then it can automatically go through your environment and like, okay, the SNS that you spoke about, oh, gather all the information because you already have a set of instructions inside that's built in to say, okay, this is the owner of these accounts. These are the tags that are specified, so on and so forth. So by the time it gets to a great mage like Russ, he has a blank information to go by, right? All neatly packaged. And that's kind of where your time savings come from, right? Because now Russ doesn't have to go out and do all those kind of things, right? So you start to have these automated pieces. And the other aspect is building out your party to an aspect, and I keep saying aspect because it really is tailored, right? We were speaking about different aspect ratios before the show. You know, 4:3, 16:9, right? Depending on, hey, what is your overall bandwidth? Well, imagine being able to have the highest visibility into things, the highest aspect ratio, because you have these other pieces to your overarching security party. And we keep going with the gaming analogy because it's a fun thing to do. So if you think of it this way,
and because we're nerds.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit what if that is. I don't know what is going around, right?
Yeah.
So
nerditis.
Yeah. So when you think of that, you have one agent doing those ground level tasks. You can have another agent going through and just doing reinforcement of your, let's say, your security testing. Is your code secure? Is your SaaS, your DAS, your SCA, all of that being done? Again, right? Because often you may have something like, oh, scan on push or something along those lines. And all right, something happens within an environment, something changes. Are you covered holistically, right? Because there might be something within your code, something along those lines that you may need another quick scan to verify. And let's say if that's already done, now you can have an agent specifically for that task that's going through, right? Because it understands these different pieces. And now you can correlate and aggregate all these different findings together, right? So it gives you that intelligent visibility within your environment to look at the correct aspect ratio, right? Because you don't want to go 4:3 when you can go 16:9. Let's just say it that way. I mean, we're going to keep putting analogies out there because it's one person that's going to be like, I get that. Hopefully.
Exactly. We're just going to keep narrowing it down until we get to the most niche examples possible.
Yes. Let me tell you about 1080p.
Exactly.
Yes.
But yeah, so it is the biggest thing too around that is, no matter how many people you have, unless you're doing a lot of shift work and stuff like that, it's hard to beat the 24-hour, constant autonomous agents that are running all the time. If I can go off on a little tangent again real quick, I saw this because of things like Inspector. During the what was that Python package that got or the JavaScript that got popped a couple months ago, right around the time of Shai-Hulud?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I forget.
It was that Python package, or the JavaScript in Python, one of the dependencies. Yeah. So that we actually were involved in that pretty early, because we had basically as soon as we found out about it, Inspector updated their detections to include the afflicted packages. And then after that, all of a sudden, our cases ballooned up because Inspector was notifying all of our customers that they were potentially involved. And so that level of like, hey, we can make a big impact at scale with these autonomous agents that are working 24/7. That's a little bit different because there was an actual human in the loop on that time, but that's the sort of thing, 24/7, I don't want to say coverage, but they're operating 24/7 to be able to get you that information as quickly as possible, or to detect, known bad. But also there's a lot that the AI agents are doing to not just detect, but also to try to remember what known good looks like. So that way, instead of necessarily tagging on only, known bad, it's tagging on anything that's anomalous from your routine. So yeah, I feel like I'm jumping ahead and trying not to. But there is a lot of pros here, and also a lot of information, and like the getting closer and closer to like left side of boom, and implementing these defenses so that way they prevent the attack from ever actually occurring. Feels like we're getting closer and closer every day. But then attackers create a new methodology, and then we're back to square one. So
yeah, well, and that's the thing is remembering the square one. I think that's the important takeaway part of that, right? Where
Mhm.
before it would be square one, one of one, right? It's almost like resetting the chessboard, opposed to now where it's like, hey, I know your opening moves, right? I know your Queen's Gambit move, right? You're going to start out with that. Yeah, it's the one move I know, and I'm going to use that, right? So when you think of that way, you start to say, okay, there may be something to adding these so I can have somewhat self-healing infrastructure. That's kind of what we're trying to go towards, right? Automated misconfiguration, remediation, all that good stuff. But on the other side of it, being able to prepare, to your point, Russ, where it's like, hey, if something like NPM or something along those things happen, then you're like, hey, I can automatically help this out, and also say good afternoon to Zardoc. But I have to go back to Ari, and the reason why I laughed at this is Ari's one of the people that got that joke. The 1080 Pi, right? If you can remember when they were separated, right? And I was a thing, but I digress from that standpoint, because one of the things that we're trying to get to, in part of that understanding, is, hey, how can we take these things of past of yore, right? I think I use yore, right, because it's been a while since my D&D. But when you start to think about it, you think of, hey, these are the legendary things that have come up in the past that we're trying to bring back and maybe have our agentic AI and our autonomous agents remember. So I think legends are a great way to, I would say, go about that arc of learning, right? So with every great legend comes some great, I would say song, right? So as I am your bard for today. So as we speak about agentic AI, I think the best way to do this is with a customer story. And this is our segment where we dive into a customer story. This myth, this legend. Let's continue the story of said Castle Forge Studios, because that sounds like a name that doesn't exist, hopefully. So when we start to go down the route, think of what they came from. They implemented Control Tower. They just went to AWS 8 months ago, but they started to implement centralized logging across all their 62 game studios, their live service accounts. They built out detective controls with a helping side of preventative controls. They forged organizational-wide guardrails. Hey, they also have SCPs that prevent people from disabling CloudTrail, Guard Duty, and Security Hub. So, what is next for said studio? Well, I think that's where you start to get into that new Game Plus conversation, because the difficulty of scaling up is always the unknown. And that unknown can be, hey, where do you go within the next 12 to 18 months? So if you acquire 2 additional game studios, 4 additional game studios in different countries, different regions, maybe you have to scale your defenses, because now you might have more log consumption. You might need more of, to say, visibility, because once you do acquisition, you're taking in those pieces. And do you bring the accounts into your organization? Do you have a separate organization? These are all questions where you define in your security target state strategy, but also from just an awareness of, hey, what is our current limitations? What is the current wall we're trying to climb over? What are we trying to scale? And I pose this question to Russ and the comment section of saying, hey, when do you notice a security pipeline hitting the wall when it comes to scaling? Russ, I pose this question to you to start off with.
So I'm going to go ahead and say, and this might be a little bit of a hot take, but if you have any sort of backlog at all, you're not scaling properly. If you can't deal with the amount of tickets that or alerts that you get in a day in your security pipeline, then you need to do more to scale that solution. Whether that's, adding more people, adding additional like weighted impact scores. But there's also the option to, I don't know, get some agentic, use out of there.
Yes. And with that, that's where I play our side quest board face up, right? So for your first time joining the side quest board, just add some more visualization to that. And to Russ's point, so we head down the path of, we have tech debt, we have backlog, we have Victor with a comment. Does fix include same remediation, but we're talking about multiple domains. Yes. So that's the thing. We have multiple domains. Now we have an acquisition that happens. Now you're responsible for a security posture across two organizations that are coming together as one, right? It's almost like 5 mini robots coming together to form one giant robot. So when you think of it that way, you start to think of, hey, how do I audit what's happening within the current organization environment? Well, there can be CloudTrail logs. That's one thing. And that can tell you, hey, I have authenticated users and I have unauthenticated users trying to access my resources. So how do I get to the point of, hey, this is a good thing within my environment. I have different metrics. Maybe we have CloudWatch metrics. Maybe we have some type of security pipeline in place. And I think the point we're trying to get to is now, let's say, hey, I have CloudWatch also within my environment, monitoring and chasing these different aspects. Okay, we have a lot going on. We are reading a bunch of different logs. We're understanding what's happening within different environments. But the one thing you have to know is now you might have an inspector service. You might have guard duty. You may have Macy. You may have, we even throw down WAF way over there. Okay, that's great.
Love to see the WAF representation.
Right? Yeah, right? It's just WAF in there. And the other side tangent, get Shield Advanced and then have the WAF rules and the customer. It's kind of one of the tips I would say. If you were to take away one thing, look into Shield Advanced with WAF. But I digress, because in our story, we have all these different security services, because remember, our organization set up our detect and preventative controls. But the part we are trying to get to is, okay, if we have limited personnel, how do we bridge the understanding of all these different services? While you can have something like said security hub there, yeah, that is a great service and it has some machine learning built into it and all that good stuff. But the point we're trying to get to is, if you have all of these paths, all of these different services, that something happens within the environment and you need to gather information fast, and you are new to the AWS cloud, how do you go about doing this? And this can be overwhelming. It looks overwhelming on screen, right? You have all these different services, right? And these all part of, let's say, the security reference architecture and well-architected framework and things of that nature. But if it's 3 a.m. and you're on a conference bridge, okay, something happened within the environment. Okay, where do you check? And that's kind of what we're trying to move towards with the agentic AI understanding, right? Because now you have pipelines and maybe you need to push changes. Maybe you need to make some temporary configuration changes just to stop whatever is happening, right? What we're not even accounting for is, hey, within our Castle Forge studios, they might have other scanning tools, third-party tools. These are just the native services. So if you have vulnerability prioritization that needs to happen, okay, what if that prioritization is just a gut feeling of one engineer? It's like, hey, we should focus here. Okay, what is the data that backs that? Well, I worked on this one service, and that was the only service I worked on, so I think we should start over here. Right? And that's the wall that we're trying to scale, especially from a pipeline perspective, right? Because when you're building out your scanning tools and trying to figure out the stuff that's happening within your environment, it's a lot of different pieces. Because do you have your security team focus on scaling or trying to remediate an action through your pipeline? Or do you have them focus on gathering the data and pieces to make those changes? And that's where we try to move towards, hey, when it's dangerous to go alone, take somebody, take a friend, take a teammate, take a party member. Because the benefit of this as we were kind of doing the spoilers earlier, is as we go down our journey and we figure out all these different services, what if we can have a multi-agent architecture built using something like the Bedrock agents or the Agentic AI in order to enforce, I would say, kind of a standardization approach, right? And that standardization is already built in by things you did proactively because you already looked at your environment in such a way that you have different agents doing different things to produce different results that can be correlated by your higher levels. So if you have your scout agent where you have your intelligent findings triage in such a manner that is correlated, or your tank agent that's taking in all the, let's say, intelligent vulnerability stuff, then your healer agent, so on and so forth, you can see how it kind of starts to build. So that leads us to a question. And I pose this question to Russ and chat. Human in the loop. How do you manage the human in the loop in this case, especially within an incident? Say you have all of this happening, you have agents. Where does the human go?
That's a great question. And there's a lot of different answers to that. And so basically, I have in my mind, right? Since we're dealing with AI agents and stuff like that, I'm thinking that there's already like some sort of automated runbooks, and so if you have some at least basic automated runbooks, this thing happens, then you do this, and you can basically just be like, okay, this incident is happening. Let's, follow that. Just press that playbook, and the automation will do its thing. But outside of that, once you get past, all the data collection and prioritizing based off of rules and not CVS scores. CVS scores do not provide business context. And so, having, a human in the loop for the actual analysis, any place in the pipeline that has a judgment call, or if there's any large, basically you should also know when the AI agent is going to do anything that could cause an outage in production, because you don't want your AI agent to cause an outage in production. That's the whole point of getting an AI agent, is so that way they can monitor and keep things up and running 24/7. So you want to ensure that anything in the production account is done with at least some sort of human in the loop, maybe not manually doing it, but human in the loop to ensure that you're not going to either cause further outages or take down production or whatever that might be. So analysis, judgment calls, and when messing with production.
Yeah.
Those are my three answers.
Yeah, and I think with security as well is when you start to look at what are you generating, what are you pushing from a data perspective.
Mm-hmm.
The other side that I think is not often spoken about enough is, okay, if we were to go down the route of having all these agents pulling all these different pieces of information, and you have that data going to, I don't know, centralized logging bucket or wherever the case may be, what is the cost implications for that? And usually those questions don't come up until you're reviewing the environment to optimize and things of that nature. But I think this is worth looking at from a holistic standpoint and taking the good old pause from a Zach Morris perspective on this, right? Because when you start to think about it, really, is if we take that step back and you look at, okay, I have all of these tools, these controls in place. Now I don't hear anything. I'm viewing things, but I don't hear anything. And what I mean by that is the noise, right? You don't have that noise in the background, right? Because usually when you're searching for different things, sometimes what you hear is that, okay, I hear a different tone of the sadder variety playing. It's like, oh, I'm searching for this. Who's the owner of this account? What do these tags do? What is this? Right? That's a different thing, right? Because what you're trying to move towards is that silence, because what you want to focus on is your overall strategy for remediating and then building and improving, so on and so forth, right? And we go with that gaming inspired security strategy here on Safe Room Feature and Security Side Quest because one, it's fun. Two, we can talk about roles and classes, right? Because if you have your tank agent, this is where we start to go off the rails. You have your tank agent. Think of that as your perimeter defense specialist, right? You deploy that robust agent, and what are they doing? Hey, think of AWS WAF. You think of Shield. You think of network firewall. They're able to absorb and deflect incoming attacks, right?
Your frontliners.
Yeah, see, and they're dealing with some of your critical pieces of infrastructure. And they're also the early warning systems for something going on. Then you can have your DPS, right? Where, hey, they're rapidly eliminating threats. And that's where you think of the guard duties and the lambdas and the quick fixes, right? These are the things that, hey, you can have the agent take care of because these are the low-hanging fruit, quote unquote, right? It's like, hey, this account, or I should say, this role is trying to do something it's not supposed to. And I have the context already to say, hey, this is not supposed to do this. Let's isolate this or something along those lines. We have quad zeros. Let's automatically remediate that within the pipeline. That's where the DevSecOps piece really picks up, right? Because now you have something that has context to say, we don't allow any quad zeros, and all of a sudden quad zeros is enabled. Hey, let us have the agent take care of just maybe not allowing that, right?
Also known as the yeet agent.
Yes.
It's just yeeting them out of the environment.
Yeah, just go away. Yeah, and that's kind of the thing is, and after that, after it's thrown out, you have the healer, right? And the healer agent, you think of your system recovery, right? You have systems manager, cloud formation, is we isolated this piece, we could respawn our different pieces of our environment as needed. I think that's an important consideration because as you have these different agents that have these different roles, you can already see it, the buckets that are carved out. You can start to see how experience within your environment, how it can be tailored and tweaked a certain way, right? Because it's having these experience through the different security events. So as it's building up the experience, now when a similar type of event, you already have detective preventative controls, you have background information. I say hello to El Fuego and Victor. Did our robots playing a game sometimes? Well, it'd be interesting to have the agents play a game of chess, but I think the part we are moving towards is having a sense of clarity that we didn't have before to our environment. What I mean by that is we're gathering so much more information at such a granular level that can be summarized to a higher level. Is great, right? And it's not an individual that's doing this that has to go through and take all these steps to gather that all one time. You can use something with even a spec-driven design where you're saying, okay, take this in context and come up with a spec on how to implement this and integrate this into my environment, right? These are all pieces of the puzzle that we're trying to put together. And as we start to move through this, you start to get some experience, but it seems like time is always kind of running fast a little bit, right? And when time runs fast, you start to be like, we need to do things. We need to hurry up. We need to support. We need to, let's say, figure out our security orchestration a little bit more. Yeah, I think that's the important part. So, Russ, if we're trying to figure out our security orchestration, I think the biggest part of that is this question. And that question is, what is the biggest part of our security orchestration that gives us issues? And I think this is an interesting question. As always, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 in the chat to what you think. But
yeah, so this is an interesting one. I'm gonna go with getting cross-account automation working, because that's just my personal nightmare. That's my personal nightmare.
yeah.
But it's also something that isn't the biggest challenge when you have help. So, I think one of the biggest challenges, is kind of number 5, is that I don't want to do this because I don't want to mess it up. Because we are in security and these things do have, big impact. But just make sure that you set up a development environment to be able to test these things on and implement these new challenges in a way that lets you do. Yep. I'm gonna have to agree with you, Victor. That's a tough one.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too from the perspective of, yes, cross-account automation. You just allow, pass roll star, right? That's all you have to do, right? Don't do that at all, please.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
That's not just against security best practices. That's just don't do that at all.
Exactly. And I think if I were to look at it, one of the biggest challenges that I've seen kind of from my side of the fence is designing the workflow logic. And the reason why I say that is part of designing the workflow logic is understanding the different services that are going to go into said workflow logic. And as customers' maturity level grows within the cloud, they kind of understand how the services integrate, what are the best practices, how their environment moves towards implementing the secure design components. But if you are newer to the cloud, you might not have the maturity to understand how everything kind of fits together in such a way that makes sense for your organization. But what makes sense is saying, greetings to Lewis. But I think that's part of where I lean towards from the proactive, preventative type of mindset. But cross-account automation, yes. In a secure manner, yes.
And that's just considering cross-account. Add in, multi-cloud, on-prem environments, then you start getting all sorts of, let's call it craziness and, complexity. And that's when you really got to dig into things and make sure that everything's going to go through. Basically, especially anytime you are going to not just go cross-account, but also over the public internet. You have to make sure that everything's...
I just want that to be one of the documentation pages, just like it's just Russ going. That would be the best part, right? So I think that's an important consideration too, right? And as you start to figure out the different aspects, I think an important part to consider is understanding, one, what's our current maturity level? I think that's a important aspect to organizations and companies and just plain all right, what is our starting point right now? Because if we understand our starting point, then we can start to say, okay, what do we need to refine and what do we need assistance on? Right? So
and you really need to be honest with that. Like, here's what we have the capability of, here's what's in development right now that we're working on, and here are things that we haven't even touched yet. And like be realistic about that, because if you're going to set yourself up at a baseline that isn't accurate, everything on top of that will also be inaccurate. Sorry, just want to hop in there.
No, it's exactly the point. And if you have certificate knowledge, right, that's the important part. Or do you have knowledge of the side quest variety, right? Do you go on knowledge quests? And what is a knowledge quest? Well, it's essentially those journeys you go after your 5 a.m. run, like we all do, right? You grab the beverage of your choice, coffee, tea, water, or other, you sit down, you build some aura, but oftentimes you kind of look at pieces of documentation of, hey, how do we shift left a little bit more, right? This is the next, like, how do you shift left, right? And that's where the agents start to come into place, right? Because these are all steps that build upon each other, right? So along those same lines, that's where you understand, hey, am I an apprentice mage? We spoke about this before, right? Are you just starting out being able to architect within AWS? Well, that's an important part, because when we are thinking about this, we're thinking about, okay, do we understand the security pillar? The fundamentals. We speak about the security, reliability, performance, efficiency, all those type of things. But one of the aspects that we are trying to get to is, do we understand how to get to the next level? Do we have in place something like control tower and being able to customize it to certain frameworks? I think that's an important part of the puzzle. But lastly, I think a legendary component of this, and we're going through it fast because we're trying to speed run towards, hey, this agentic AI piece, right? That's how you become a legendary mage, right? Because if you think of all good mages, what do they usually have? They have something where they can control different pieces of their environment through something else. And I think that is where we're trying to get to, is do we have enough understanding of the basics, the fundamentals, our defense in depth strategy, our target state security strategy, in order to say, hey, agent, you are an incident responder, you know about X, Y, and Z. I think that's a great place, right? So when you start to go down that route, you start to understand, like, hey, this question is perfect. And thanks for asking. What specific agentic AI capabilities are being integrated into DevSecOps pipelines, and how do they differ from traditional AI assistants? So to summarize, and we touch upon this throughout the episode, is I would say the memory component of this, because it's actively learning from what's happening within your environment. So it's not going towards and using like RAG and retrieval processes from that aspect. It's more of learning what is happening live within your pipeline, retaining that, and being able to adjust accordingly, right? If I had to summarize that at the 5,000 foot view of it, that would be the place, right? And as you start to build out and become more of a legendary mage, you start to understand these different components and how they're built out to your respective environment and your pipeline. Because in, let's say, a traditional sense, you may have a pipeline run, right? Let's say we have a control tower and LZA, and then you have your different gates where it's like, okay, it's pushing through. You may have one approval checkbox that somebody has to approve, so on and so forth. But now, hey, how do I kind of learn from every pipeline run of what's happening within my environment? How can I gather pieces of information that can help build something of a plan, something that is concrete, something that Russ would be extremely happy with?
Yes.
Russ, where am I going with that?
Please create an incident response plan. Yes. But also, I also have to use this real quick, because you said like that we're, wizards that are, and I immediately was like, oh my gosh, we're all techno mages, and our summons are all AI agents, and we're just like puppeteering them. So I don't know if that helps and makes AI sound a little bit cooler, rather than probability and statistics and making you want to fall asleep.
And I think now that we're down that rabbit hole and we have 30 seconds left, I think of it kind of around the games where it's just like, okay, I'm going to deploy this party member, and they're going to carry out these actions. I always attribute this to like the role-playing games where you have somebody join your party, but you can't control them. But they have a set of actions that they can take of, oh, heal, do this, do that. But they're moving towards the same goal as you. And that's what we're trying to get towards, especially from a pipeline perspective of, hey, how can something move towards your goal, help you build experience, 1 XP point at a time, and eventually have the outcomes that you were expected.
And at the end of the show, real quick, I know we don't have much time, but I just wanted to say thanks to AWS producer Jeff.
Yes.
Thanks, producer Jeff.
Is awesome. It's right there in the beginning of his name. If you don't see it, join next week and we'll show it again. Right? So until that time, have a good one. Take care. Stay warm.